Thank you, Dilbhushanji, for asking me this question. We heard very distinguished guests this morning at the inaugural session. Most of them touched on peace and security issues. And I think some of the issues they pointed out are quite relevant in our context. And peace and security, as we all know, are interrelated. You cannot separate one from the other. As former Speaker of the House of Representatives also very rightly said, there is no security if we can't maintain peace in the country. So, and vice versa. If there is no peace, it is very difficult to ensure, very difficult to maintain security. So that way, peace and security are quite interrelated. And so far as the military dimension of security is concerned, of course, we have a distinguished panelist here. He will throw more light on that. But security again now I would like to refer to the ambassador of Bangladesh. Security is also threat to security emanates not from military confrontation, arms conflict, nuclear proliferation, etc. But threat to security also arises from a number of factors. As he enumerated, environmental degradation is there, poverty is another major factor because both, as is pointed out, Nepal and Bangladesh being least developed countries, and poverty alleviation is also our overriding concern. And both our two countries, we are trying our best to alleviate poverty. And statistics say that we have reduced poverty from 40% to 25%, and again from 25% to lower down. But personally, I'm not very much impressed by statistical jugglery. Someone says 40 and then it comes down to 25. As a layman, I don't understand statistics. But of course, there is poverty. When you visit some areas, even inside Kathmandu, there are a number of slum areas. People are living miserable existences, very below poverty existence, and they are deprived of basic necessities of life, basic needs of life, and that also really disrupts security. It is a disturbing factor. In the same way, now recently, we hear a lot about climate change and its impact on our environment, on our living conditions, and other aspects of life. So that is another major factor contributing to security. In the same way, environmental degradation, that is also very much related to climate change. And then food security issue. Of course, we have food exporters, you will throw light on that. So that way, and we are still, of course, in 2 or 3 years' time, we are going to graduate from LDC status, least developed status, but at present we are still a least developed among developing countries, and that means the UN has laid down certain criteria according to which a country is designated as a least developed country. So one of the criteria I think we have fulfilled, this maternity mortality rate, infant mortality, we have made a lot of progress. But there are other areas in which still we have to come up to the standard set by the UN. But anyway, hopefully we may graduate by 2026, and that will also again create another problem in the sense that as the least developed countries, we are enjoying certain facilities granted by developed countries, but the moment we graduate from LDC to a middle income country, these facilities may be withdrawn, and that may again land us in trouble. So, and as the ambassador of Bangladesh pointed out, we have Nepal and Bangladesh have already approached other development partners, other highly industrialized countries to take into consideration our status immediately after graduation from LDC status. So when I was in the UN from 1976 to 1980 as one of the as deputy representative of Nepal to the United Nations. There are several committees, and one of the committees is called Second Committee, which is Economic Committee. And our ambassador there, Mr. Sailendra Kumar Upadhyaya, who later became also foreign minister, he was permanent representative, and he told me that you are deputy, so as deputy you will have to look after the second committee. And second committee, of course, very important to a country like Nepal, because all these issues relating to least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and other areas like food, industry, so many other things. They came up for discussion in this particular committee. And I remember as a landlocked country, we tabled a resolution, and several landlocked countries, they co-sponsored this particular resolution, and surprisingly, Bangladesh was a new member, because Bangladesh, which became independent in 71, had already joined the UN, and the delegate of Bangladesh in the second committee, although Bangladesh is a coastal country, it is a transit country, but it offered to co-sponsor that resolution. Prepared and tabled by landlocked developing countries. That really came as a not only a surprise, but a big relief and also satisfaction to us. And so, of course, a number of conferences on least developed countries have already been completed, but our status has not yet gone up this year.
As you all know, although we are a small state with about 13 million population, we are contributing second largest troops and police to the United Nations peace missions to maintain international peace and security. That is one of the top contributions Nepal could give to the world. And all security agencies are actually participating in that, and currently the Nepalese army is given a responsibility to protect territorial integrity and other non-military or non-traditional jobs, missions. For example, besides its primary job, Nepalese army is contributing in nation building, here at home, environmental protection, construction works, and providing security to various installations, and indirectly, contributing to education, sports. This is a peacetime job where military can contribute, and there is a misunderstanding in Nepal that when it comes to defending the nation, it is only the responsibility of an army, which is not true. You can see now in Ukraine, army is there to fight the war in the front, but whole nation is behind the army, supporting psychologically, materially, and diplomatically, by mustering international support behind the country. So I think war fighting is a whole of the nation approach, which very much misunderstood here. Sometimes even our leaders understand that, Nepalese army cannot fight a war. It is not the job of only the army. It is the leadership which has to prepare its army to perform its role, given role, within the given period of time. For that, you have to build the capacity of your security institutions, the way we are building institutions in other sectors as well. But besides that, the way I see security of a small country like Nepal, any small states, particularly situated between two giant neighbors like us, non-military or traditional security threats are more challenging, day by day. Because if you look at the open border regime we have been, maintaining since the signing of the Sugauli Treaty, most of the threats emerge in Nepal is due to open border. Whether you talk about, smuggling, smuggling of human trafficking, smuggling of arms, ammunition, explosive, movement of terrorists from one country to another, movement of anti-government elements from one country to another. So most of the security threats actually emerge from the border, which we have not been able to manage because of traditional relationship with our neighbors. And another one is the security challenges Nepal is facing, and its ramification is in all sectors of our national life is the political instability. Nepal is the most unstable country in South Asia. If you take the example of how many prime ministers, how many political system, or how many constitutions we have changed, problems, neither it can address external challenges. The first thing we have to do is, to keep our house in order, to maintain political stability. Then you can achieve economic prosperity. When you achieve economic prosperity, you can build capacity of security agencies. You can now our youths are fleeing away from the country. They are the wealth and muscle strength of the country. They are not here. So unless we do, industrialization or create opportunity here in Nepal, our main strength, the youths, are not here. So we are weak because of so many factors, and this is one of the key factors now we are facing today.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We have seen from the experience of many countries around the world that food insecurity can lead to democratic breakdown, rioting, and social conflict. For example, the 2007-2008 global food crisis led to food riots and protests in 40 low and middle income countries. More recently, in 2022, there were more than 12,000 protests around the world in 20 low income countries where food prices rose very significantly. And if you look at Nepal's situation, we were spared the effect of the global food crisis in 2007-2008 because we had a relatively good domestic harvest and there were informal flows of food from India. So we were saved by that. But things have changed very dramatically since then. Nepal became a food importer beginning in the 1980s. We used to be self-sufficient and we even exported some food until that period. And more concerning and more alarming issue is that our food imports are rising very, very rapidly. For example, in 2020-21, we imported agricultural commodities, mainly food, worth 300 billion rupees. And this figure is increasing every year. So it's an alarming situation. So I think Nepal needs to think very hard in terms of how to manage the food crisis situation that is impending. There are potential, luckily, fortunately, we are very fortunate. We are a very resourceful country in terms of agricultural resources. We have fertile land, we have irrigation water, and there is a very wide yield gap. The yield that the farmers are getting currently and what they can achieve if we supply them with enough irrigation water, fertilizer, and new technologies. For example, our main staples are rice, maize, and wheat, the three important crops. And the yield gap is about 3 metric tons per hectare, meaning that if we can increase the yield of these three commodities, we can not only be sufficient, we can even export 3 or 4 million tons of food grains to other countries. So what is preventing us from achieving that goal? Actually, there are a number of structural problems related to low productivity, but there are also emerging problems like the impact of climate change. Climate change has very drastically impacted on the potential of agricultural productivity increases. So we need to develop more climate smart agriculture technologies. We need to spread those technologies to farmers through policy support by the government in terms of subsidy, now in terms of spread of technologies, extension methods. And we also need to access global funds that are being made available to developing countries to combat the effects of climate change. There are green funds, there are climate change related funds, and Nepal can even benefit from payment for environmental services by adopting more conservation oriented agricultural technologies. So the potential is there, but I think the government has to play a very important role in promoting infrastructure development, be it roads, be it irrigation facilities, and also there needs to be institutional development to promote contact farming between farmers and the final consumers.
Amount of potential, but potentiality does not mean anything. It's a kind of rhetoric of defense, a kind of rhetoric of defense to cover our weaknesses. Unless potentiality is performed, potentiality means nothing. So what happens is, let me give you one example, that when I'm talking about Nepali art and culture, which is tremendously democratic in sensibility, which is syncretic in performance, which is very plural in terms with Buddhist and Hindu traditions, and also incorporating other ethnic beliefs and attitudes and other religions. Now, when I communicate this thing, I will connect it with Dr. Silwal's statement, which is very important for me to understand. When I communicate Nepali art in a global platform, in Anglophonic publications, in Anglophonic, in English language, which is necessary to communicate, because English is a global language and you have to write in English at times. But then what happens, Nepali identity comes as a kind of blockage. Because Nepal is unstable, Nepal is a weak country. So my idea of Nepali art, it's thousands and thousands years of tradition, gets a kind of barrier when I communicate it. If same thing happens with Greece or Banaras, which have thousands years of tradition, Kathmandu also has thousands years of tradition. But when I speak from the location of Nepal, I realize that I cannot communicate properly. And one of my students suggested that, sir, to be globally communicative, at least from your location, not in a pervasive way, since you go to the United States, so why don't you write in your blog that your summer residence is Washington DC, so that people will think that, okay, he has some American identity also. So you see, this is my problem. I was unnerved by that I was really unnerved by that suggestion that why should I need? I have written books in Francis and Taylor, and then I sometimes suppose that I have written pretty argumentative books. But why do I have to change my identity from Nepali location to, even for 2 months, that he works, his summer residence is in the United States? Then I will have a kind of accessibility to communicate with the Western broader audience. Now, here comes Dr. Silva's, if Nepal is an unstable country, if it is a weak country, then whatever you speak to the global audience, it gets some kind of impediments. That is my problem as an individual, as a writer.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. I've not been very much into this discourse for a long time, anyway, but it's an interesting and engaging question. I was scrolling the literature on Nepali diaspora and their role in peacekeeping, security concerns, and there's almost nothing written about it. Yeah, a lot of discourses there about how national development could be possible in the interiors of the Nepali culture and society, in the form of lobbying for different kinds of facilities, and basically in directing the investment in the country. There's a lot written about it, but almost nothing about how they can contribute to Nepal's peace and security. So therefore, this can be a kind of agenda setting today. What can the diaspora do for vulnerable security times, in the absence of peace or in the presence of violence? That would be a question, actually. What is their role or what is their identity? Actually, there are different categories of diaspora, starting with the formative diaspora that basically contribute to the country by sending remittances, and the advanced or mature diaspora who can also mold public and international opinion about the country's economic condition, political scenario, or somehow, in a sense, lobby in order to resolve such issues. So if we are talking about a diaspora that can contribute to Nepal in peace and security concern, it should be the mature one, or the advanced one, who have been established financially, culturally in a foreign country. But a general scenario is, who makes a bigger hue and cry when there are crises in the country? Is it the advanced diaspora or the formative diaspora that basically lives in the so-called third world or the developing third world, like the Gulf countries? So I think there are 3 layers of contribution if they ever do. The first layer could be advocacy. Advocacy in the sense like our Nepalese brothers and sisters are now stationed in those countries who are literally better off than our country in terms of peace, security, economic condition, public service, and also greater civic awareness. So one thing that they really show is intolerance towards any form of extremism in Nepal, whether it is done by any political parties or the Nepal government or any insurgent groups. The first people to speak very vociferously, at least in the public sphere, in the cyberspace, is the Nepalese. They are intolerant towards any form of extremism. Regarding human rights violation, regarding any kind of injustice in the country. So I think their contribution starts with advocacy, but if we think about resolving a serious security situation, that should go to the point of active lobbying and militancy. Militancy in the form of, again, creating public opinion and molding public opinion to the extent of influencing the international actors. So I would see it's a kind of hypothetical situation right now. Unless we really face a serious security situation in the Nepal in terms of international or cross-border security, we'll have to see how the Nepalese diaspora can really function in the international arena. I would like to say this much. I think there is a lot of hue and cry about the government system being very unfriendly in terms of policies and law and other things. I would recommend at least two things. Work from the bottom up level, in the grassroots level. There are now, to the level of local government, there are ward chairs and then, let's say, so informal or formal organizations who would be better positioned to collaborate with international community, at least in friendship, in the ground of friendship. I would call it friendship-induced collaboration with the diaspora that we can do in the community level. That would be one way by let's say inviting investment or some kind of philanthropic activity in the local level. Another is seeking collaboration with universities, because I am positioned to do that on my part also. It's very easy to work with international community, basically Nepalese diaspora, from the locations of universities with very little legal hurdle. Yeah.
You know, I had the, what shall I say, honor or privilege, whatever you call it, but I was also one of the members of the delegation led by late King Birendra to the first SAARC summit in Dhaka in 1985. You know, this summit, when it was launched in Dhaka in December 1985, there was a lot of euphoria, you see. And on the podium were seated, now none of the leaders is alive today. Rajiv Gandhi was there, J.R. Jayawardene of Sri Lanka was there, and you know, King Birendra, King Jigme from Bhutan, then you know Bangladesh, Hussain Mohammad Irsad, he was the host in 1985, and then Pakistan, Ziaul Haq, Mohammad Ziaul Haq. So they were seated on the podium, and none of them now is no more is there, he said. But and this SAARC had been launched after more than 5 years of intensive preparations at the level of foreign ministers, at the level of foreign secretaries. So high expectations were raised by SAARC for regional cooperation. And one thing different from ASEAN, they had, you know, common security perception. When ASEAN countries joined SAARC, they had the looming shadow of communism. But in SAARC, you see, there was no common threat perception, because each country had its own perception, security perception. So they focused basically on economic issues. How to ensure prosperity in the region, how to, let us say, bring, augment the lifestyle, living standards of the people. So, but of course the agenda was in a way very unmanageable, you see, the SAARC agenda. It covered wide-ranging areas, from poverty to environmental degradation and to terrorism also. In 1987, Nepal hosted the third SAARC summit, and they came up with a convention on the prevention of terrorism, accompanied by a protocol. But it took many years to endorse this convention, you know, for all countries, because one thing that was necessary was enabling legislation. Each country had to come up with this enabling legislation. And unless there is that enabling legislation, so it could not come into force, this SAARC convention. So that way, let me just start, because I can speak for hours on SARC.
Yeah, but you need to finish in minutes.
So in fact, I attended the initial 5 SARC summits. 85 Kathmandu, 86 Bangalore, India, 87 Kathmandu, 85 Dhaka, and then 84 Islamabad. And then the last, in 1989, it was Sri Lanka's talk. But Sri Lanka refused to host the summit on the ground that Indian troops were still there. And the president that time was Prem Dasa. And Prem Dasa, he issued an ultimatum to this Indian contingent to leave, but they were dallying, they were dallying tactics, so they could not. And he announced, we cannot host this 5th summit in Colombo. And Kathmandu had asked me to, because I was also ambassador to Sri Lanka from Dhaka, and I called on Prem Dasa as per the instruction from Kathmandu to persuade him not to postpone this summit, because the SARC charter categorically mentions that contentious bilateral issues should not be discussed. And it was a contentious bilateral issue. The stationing of Indian troops in Colombo, that was something purely bilateral. But no, Prem Das, no, we are not a sovereign country now. We are under foreign occupation. Indian troops are here, and a country under foreign occupation, do you expect Sri Lanka to host this summit? So I just wrote back the same his response, and Sri Lanka did not host that. And in 1990, Maldives hosted the summit, the 5th SARC summit. I was also present there at the Maldives summit. And after that, there was some, political changes in Nepal. But I have been following SARC developments, SARC events right from the beginning, because I attended the first SARC summit. And the 18th summit, it was again Nepal, which hosted the 18th summit in 2014. And then the 18th summit, it decided to hold the next summit, that is 19th summit in Islamabad. Then something happened. So a number of Indian soldiers were killed, and it was India's allegation that it was done by Pakistan. So India refused to attend this summit. Now, since 2014, it is already over 9 years. 9 years, no summit, SARC summit, and now critics say that it is almost in a state of coma, and so it's almost dead, you see, SARC. But personally, I think we should not allow SARC to really collapse, you see, because we launched it, and what is the alternative to cooperation? The alternative to cooperation is conflict. So, and even the 2 SARC secretaries, Nepal's SARC secretary, former SARC secretary, Y.K. Silwal and Arjun, both of them, they said that both Pakistan and India, they also need SARC. But because of this bilateral tension, they are not in a position to let it contribute.
I think Nepal has officially adopted the policy of economic diplomacy, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, etc. But I think much more needs to be done in terms of economic diplomacy to attract more foreign direct investment and also official development assistance. And I think I can think of 2 areas in which Nepal can do better. One is capacity building of our diplomatic missions. I hope Dr. Mohan Dhoni and Dr. Simkhada would agree with me that our missions, diplomatic missions, and also missions in cities like New York, Geneva, and Vienna, where UN agencies are concentrated, the capacity is not adequate. I think there needs to be more aware of new technologies, communication skills, IT, etc., the staff. And these missions are understaffed in terms of economic diplomacy. But I think there is a potential of using Nepali diaspora. In all of these countries, there are excellent Nepali professionals working in different fields. And I'm sure they would be more than happy to provide their expertise to Nepali missions, pro bono or even with a small sum of money. In this respect, I would also like to inform you that in Nepal there is an association called FIPMO, Former International Professionals of Multilateral Organizations. There are 80 plus members with very rich experience in different UN organizations, World Bank, Asian Development Bank. And this group is ready to provide free advisory support and also suggestions to different line ministries. Their focal point is Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Institute of Foreign Affairs. But I think they are willing to also work with other line ministries in developing proposals to attract more funding, in evaluation of things. And also, I think another area where Nepal can do better is to effectively participate in policy-making bodies of these international organizations like the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, International Fund for Development. For that, the delegation, including the ministers and high-level officials, this is out of my experience of working in Rome. I mean, I have been lucky enough to see many agriculture ministers and even ministers of finance attending these high-level meetings, but they come unprepared, very little preparation in terms of what is Nepal's development priority and what kind of support they need from these international organizations. So I think they need to do their homework first. And second thing is these organizations allocate the resources on the basis of a system called performance-based allocation system. That means our ongoing projects in the country needs to do better in terms of delivering results to the needy, and also there needs to be good governance and control of corruption, etc. I think Nepal needs to do more.
On all international issues, while dealing with our neighbors, we're dealing on very critical issues like borders, border encroachment, we are divided. So first of all, we have to be united on national interest. And our perception to look at our neighbors and international community should be through protecting and preserving our interests. So, but we are sidelining our interests and focusing on strong national or group or party interest, much more than required. So that's where we are, going off the track. In order to, bring the country forward, I think we have to, as I said earlier, we have to focus on bringing political stability, focusing on self-reliance. When we are dependent on other countries, like, if you take data between India and Nepal trade, we are importing $12 billion equivalent goods from India annually, and we are exporting only $1 or $1.5 billion equivalent goods. So we are too much dependent, and that dependency was much less about 3 or 4 decades ago. I think there was no dependence at all in 1960s. So we are gradually becoming dependent on others. Dependency weakens the country, because now we are politically dependent. Our government has changed, probably not by the people's, votes. And there are a lot of external, manipulations, interferences. So that has to be stopped first. And politicization of institutions, including the sacred institution, must be stopped. That would be the starting point to get where we want to go. The final destination, which is prosperity, happiness, all these things.
Like, just one example I will give you, and to talk about how Nepali culture can communicate with the global audience. One of my students wanted to work on democracy, and then he came up with his proposal, and he came up with a timeline after this rise of Constituent Assembly and end of this conflict, when all parties participated in Nepali democratic process. Now democracy starts, and his starting point of writing about Nepali democracy was 2006 and 7. I completely rejected his ideas based on understanding Nepali consciousness. I said that why do you have to use Western theories of democracy and electoral politics and talk about democracy only in terms with these kind of phenomena which happened up to 2016. You should go back to look at Nepali democracy. And said, and so I told him that it is not about politics. It is also about why don't you go to mother culture or even back to Lichvi culture and look at art and culture and literature and try to theorize and define Nepali democracy. Because democracy does not mean only electoral politics. Democracy does not mean political institutions. Democracy is a consciousness. So, reading Nepali history, Nepali culture, even going back to 200 years or 300 years, there are again the same thing. There are so much of potentiality. Those potentiality, for instance, for me as a theorist of culture, because I'm a theorist by training, I always theorize, like Professor Ashish Nandi told me once that if you do not theorize, you cannot globalize. So I theorize Nepali culture in my books, in my writings. So when you talk about Nepali democracy, there are immense amount of materials from art and culture of Nepal, even 200, 300, 400 years back, and talk about Nepali democracy. So these kind of things have to be understood by our scholars and students, that when we are talking about something, we do not limit ourselves to a discipline. We go to the entire gamut of culture, the spectacle of culture, the history of culture, and this is very significant to communicate Nepali idea of Nepal or ideas of Nepal to global audience.
Hearing so many times, and in the present context of Nepal's politics, what I am thinking, like, we are trapped of politically. We are politically trapped. Why I am saying? Because in political race, third is superimposing second and first. And my curiosity to Dr. Arun Gupta sir, because he is a cultural things. So what political, are we secure politically? And the second question to him, sir, about the diaspora. I'm always confused about the mercenaries people, mercenaries, Gurkha and mercenaries. Because I'm remembering those soldiers or youth involving in Ukraine and Russia war. And I doubt, maybe they are in Hamas or in Israel or not, I don't know. Are they diaspora, or are they mercenaries, or are they Gurkha soldiers?
Two types of diaspora instead. One is diaspora that is working as laborers, and they are contributing a lot remittance to Nepal, and their voice is almost unheard, ignored. Second one is highly skilled, educated diaspora, which is completely indifferent about the happening in Nepal, and who are almost satisfied, they have a kind of pleasant feeling of escaping this political system in Nepal. That is one thing. They are totally indifferent. Second one is a little bit sensitive diaspora, who are being used as bad carriers by the Nepalese political party, like Homeland. They are also very much critical about Nepalese happening. So, constructive role of diaspora that can contribute to peace and stability of Nepal.
Dr. Arun Gupta, do the cultural performances or carnivals by ethnic group of people in Nepal help in maintaining peace in Nepal?
Security concerns, and then so many peoples that in the context of Nepal they are marginalized and they don't have access for mainstream facilities and different kinds of inclusion and others. So in this context, so how our culture, their ethnic culture and local, their own harmonious form of that practices, how could be the means for their security?
There is no threat. I'm answering the question that what is our security position. My individual security position, my individual Nepali performance is collective Nepali performance. I gave the signature, but there are some columns where it said you can hide your identity. So I clicked that particular whatever box and said, don't expose my identity. But still the name came. And the problem is that as a Nepali, my security as an individual is determined by what I spoke in favor of human rights and from which location I speak. If my visa has Bangladesh stamps, then I might be asked question when I enter into Europe and America. If my visa has Pakistani stamp, or if 2 visits, then they raise their eyebrows. So these individual problems, and many people suggest that before going to Europe or before going to America, don't go to Bangladesh, because they might ask questions. Even Bangladesh is not in a list of insecurities, but still. So my individual position is very much threatened when I talk or communicate about human rights, about liberalism, about democracy. So individual Nepali security has some kind of individual intangible problems.
Diaspora, I had this very intriguing question. All Nepali diaspora, that was the academic answer. Because there are certain conditions to qualify a group of people as diaspora. But 3 conditions I would say. The first is the diasporization, the condition of dispersal. That usually is unpleasant and instigated by violence. So if that is the case, none of us from Nepal, who we call diaspora, qualify in that category. Because most of us don't leave because of violence or unfriendly political condition. The second is the networking and strength in the host land. The third is the idea of return to the homeland. Return is not physical basically, re-turn, that means emotional, psychological repatriation to the homeland. So your people, the mercenary soldiers or migrant workers, whoever you call, they do not have the second 2 criteria, like networking among themselves and being able to exert some kind of influence in the host land. And the third is the sense of emotional return with some kind of physical, financial strength. So in these 2 categories, probably they are not diaspora. So we safely can call them, I would not be really happy to call them mercenary soldiers, but anyway, what do you call that? Unlucky people. Ikraz Dahalsar's question, I'll be very brief. How to engage creatively? So I'm happy that he has the 3rd category of diaspora, used diaspora from inside. I think the used diaspora belongs to the migrant workers category itself. There have been a lot, they have been used, they have volunteered to be used. Where do we have to be creative? We need to be creative or innovative in such a situation when handling people is difficult. I don't think that handling the migrant workers is difficult. They are self-handled, they are self-regulated. So if your complex category is that educated and indifferent, advanced diaspora stationed at advanced countries, so-called advanced countries, we need to be creative to engage these people. One problem I have seen is we are not very receptive with this category of people. there is some kind of elitist conflict between those of us in the country and those of them. So don't show off kind of attitude we have. So long ago I read an article which said that we need to deal with the diaspora not with nationality but with rationality. That means we have to be very critical and judgmental at the same time judicious in the way they are trying to exert their influence not only in the politics of the country but also in the interiors of the culture. In the way we are functioning in Nepal, and we also have these tendencies of saying, do not teach us. We know how we are doing what we do. We know the condition, we know the pains and pleasures of working in Nepal. So this kind of subtle conflict between those of us here and those trying to come back and claim some kind of presence in Nepali academic and economic or political arena, this conflict can be resolved again by emphasizing more on philanthropist presence rather than, I would say, very much identity-oriented, or let's say, what do you call that, ego-oriented kind of presence. So, thank you.
Linguistically also there were some issues, but then I knew that this is a new topic, and I also knew that this is a topic that must be explored, partly because, you know, based on all of your articulations, the entire stock of our knowledge base is what I call acquired information knowledge from somewhere else. There is very little in terms of its internalization within our own. And beyond that, its dissemination based on, you know, the transition of knowledge once you acquire with your own life experience, and further redefinition by what we call human conscience. You know, that is ultimately what we call jnana in Oriental wisdom. So in that sense, I'm both inspired but also a bit troubled in the sense that oftentimes our intellectual discourse, I sometimes call it maybe not exactly Dilbhushan mode of intellectual discourse, I often call it Rishi Dhamala mode of intellectual discourse. Intellectual discourse does not happen that way. It takes a much deeper reflection and of course assimilation. So in that sense, I see that each topic that you addressed, although we invited you based on this still some sense of uncertainty that we had in mind when we started in this process, has in fact validated the fact that we are on a very right course, and each topic needs to be further explored in its disaggregation, so that is so important for our society. Of course, our society is, कुर्सी विज्ञ हुने देश भन्छ नि है, यहाँ व्यक्ति विज्ञ हुने होइन कि जो पावरमा पुग्यो, whoever is in power is a विज्ञ, त्यो किसिमको मनस्थिति भएको उसलाई तर कारणले नै आज हामी चाहिने जुन लेभल अफ कन्फ्युजनमा छ हरेक एरियामा, चाहे त डिप्लोमेसीमा अघि क्यापासिटी बिल्डिङको कुरा गर्नु हो, अरुण गुप्त सरले चाहिने त्यो कल्चरको चाहिने आइडेन्टिफिकेसन, एक्सटर्नल आइडेन्टिफिकेसन भन्नुहोस् न, मलाई सोध्न मन थियो उहाँसँग कि त्यो हाम्रो हिस्टोरिकली वी आर अ अथोरिटी बाइन्डिङ सोसाइटी, टुडे ए सोसाइटी विच क्वेसचन्स अल डाइमेन्सन्स अफ अथोरिटी। अथोरिटी भन्ने बित्तिकै त्यो चाहिने अलमोस्ट टु द पोइन्ट अफ चाइनाको कल्चरल रेभोल्युसनको बेलामा हुन्छ नि, ओल्ड र विजडम र अलि ऊ भन्ने बित्तिकै त्यसलाई डिस्ट्रोय गरिहाल्नु पऱ्यो भन्ने किसिमको। जर्साको चाहिने सिक्युरिटी डाइमेन्सनमा भेरी इम्पोर्टेन्ट इस्यु ल्याउनु भयो के भने द भेरी आइडिया अफ एन आर्मी एन्ड इट्स रोल एन्ड लिङ्क विथ सभरेन्टी इज पार्टली द टेरिटोरियल, तर त्यो टेरिटोरियल सभरेन्टी र खास गरेर बोर्डरको इस्युमा आर्मीको रोलै छैन होइन भन्दाखेरि त्यसले हाम्रो तपाईँको एक किसिमको क्वाजाई त्यो डिप्लोमेटिक सिक्युरिटी डिलेमालाई रिफ्लेक्ट गर्छ। अहिले डायस्पोराको खास गरी यो के भनेदेखि अहिले आयो नि क्वेसन जर्साले भन्नुभयो मलाई पनि मेरो पिएचडी नै इन्टरनेसनल रिलेसनमा गोर्खा मर्सिनरी हो कि बेस्ड अन एग्रिमेन्ट हाम्रो त आई हेभ टु डिफेन्ड माइसेल्फ सेइङ लुक डोन्ट कल द गोर्खा सोल्जर्स हु वर्क इन द ब्रिटिश आर्मी एज मर्सिनरीज बिकज मर्सिनरीज ओन्ली वर्क फर मनी whereas this is based on agreements between two countries. So as a result, the definition of mercenary to a Gorkha is not appropriate. भनेर डिफेन्ड त गरे हो तर अहिले हेर्दाखेरि तपाईँले चाहिँ युक्रेनमा पनि उसमा पनि अस्ति त्यो हाई लेभल फरेन पोलिसी टास्क फोर्समा म हुँदाखेरि परराष्ट्र मन्त्रालय गर्दाखेरि 12 वटा देशमा त रेगुलर आर्मीमा नेपालीहरू वर्क गरिरहेको छ बियोन्ड तपाईँको इन्डिया र भन्दाखेरि यस्ता धेरै क्वेसन्सहरू सार्कको कुरा आदरणीय सरले गर्नुभयो मेरो नेक्स्ट किताब इज फ्रम सार्क टु बिमस्टेक ब्रेक थ्रु और ब्रेक डाउन रिजनल कोअपरेसनको ब्रेक डाउन हो कि बिमस्टेकमा पुग्दाखेरि ब्रेक थ्रु हुने हो भनेर यस्ता धेरै क्वेसन्सहरू हुँदा हुँदै पनि दिल हुसैनजीले म आधा घन्टामा ल्याएँ भने